Hello, my name is Rob Hirschfeld. I'm a principal architect at Dell and one of the leads on our Crowbar and OpenStack projects. And I am here to give you an introduction to Crowbar. We're going to spend about 15 minutes seeing how to use Crowbar in a very basic way, navigate it, and get used to how it operates. And then we'll dive into subjects. So if you have ideas for things you want to see covered in future videos, please let me know. I'm at Zehicle on Twitter, and my blog is robhirschfeld.com. Please post your comments. So let's get started. So if you watched the previous video, you would have run through our VMware Workstation install and gotten into a state that looks pretty much like this. Demo is our admin node, which runs Crowbar and all the services like Chef Server and Nagios and Ganglia that are associated with it. And this is the second node that we built and turned on, and it is in a discovered state. So what that looks like is this. So in this case, it's actually cycling through the discovery node. This is what, if you've heard about Sledgehammer, Sledgehammer is just a discovery image. It's a very simple boot. It's enough to tell Crowbar that the machine's there, and then it goes into a hold state. That's that yellow flashing light, so that you can make decisions about what you want to do next before the system allocates any more, makes any more choices about how the node is going to be built. So this is just cycling in the background. The way we get it out of allocated is a couple of ways. One of the ways is to come into the node's name, click Edit, and click Allocate here. I'm not going to do that. And it'll actually tell you here, not allocated. Once you click that button, it'll say allocated. At that point, it's released, and the discovery image it'll boot past the discovery image and then start building the most basic OS, install the Chef client, and then wait for you to choose what roles you want it to be in. It's a very effective way to bring up a whole bunch of equipment if you don't really know what you want to use it for. However, we're going to be a little bit more specific here. And we're going to set this node up as a Glance server. We know we want it to be a Glance server. Glance is the OpenStack image cache. We could do anything for this. But for an example, we're going to set it up for Glance. And then we'll talk about it a little bit. One of the things that I want to point out here as a little sidebar is something specific to a VMware installation. So I'm going to walk you through this. We have our bar clamps here. Bar clamps are the modules that come with Crowbar, and we're adding bar clamps all the time for different capabilities. Most of these, the ones that are here now, with the ones are the ones that are installed by default. Crowbar, deployer, DNS, network, IPMI, logging. These are all our default behaviors. They actually determine how Crowbar runs the state machine. Real core functionality. Things like Glance, Nova, Swift are all OpenStack pieces, and they're not installed by default. You get to choose how to build them. And the way you would do that is by selecting one. We're going to build a Glance server. I'll set it up as a demo so I can give it a name and a description. And I can create that proposal, and it's going to now build it. And so I'm actually going to do this and show you what's going on. What happens here is that I have a list of available nodes. So these are the two nodes I have. But what happens is it takes the nodes that it has, and then it makes a recommendation. In this case, the Glance server that you're seeing here is actually the Chef server role for Glance. So the deployment here is actually a role in Chef. So these are tightly coupled. Crowbar is tightly coupled into Chef. The roles that we use are really Chef roles. So anything that we do in Crowbar is reflected in Chef. There's no intermediate database. Chef is the Crowbar database. So anything you change in one place or the other will be reflected on the other side. And in this case, this node's run list will include this Glance server after we apply the proposal. So I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to save this proposal because there's one other change I want to show you. Here's Chef. The default admin password will get you into the system, and if I was to look at the roles in the system, I would find, once I get to the right place in the alphabet, here's the Glance server. So this role is used for deploying Glance, and it has all the recipes and cookbooks and resources associated with it. And what the proposal is going to do is literally take nodes in the system and put them in the correct roles. There is logic in the bar clamps for that assignment. So you can actually have very sophisticated logic about how you distribute nodes into roles so that you can avoid fault zones or find systems that have the right resource profiles. You can put a lot of logic behind them if you want. Or you can just make the decisions here and change them. So I could drag out this role, this node, or put it back in. Before I do any of this, what I want to do is I want to make an important change that's specific to a virtualized VMware instance. In this case, I do not have an IPMI system, right? I just clicked on the bar clamp. So I want to turn off IPMI. By default, IPMI is on because Crowbar's target is usually physical hardware. But for a virtualized environment, there is no BMC, so I am setting it to false. I must save the proposal, and then I need to apply the proposal, right? So I can also pull this, so I don't want this machine in here. I'm going to save that. So now it's when it builds this IPMI configuration, it won't include that machine. And it's actually going to go and start doing the configuration because I made this change. So it's probably not going to hurt you if you don't do that, but it's useful to do it because you don't need IPMI set up for that machine. The other thing I want to do is I want to come into my glance proposal here, and at this point this machine, remember, was in this hold mode. Let's see if it's still in this hold mode. It is. So what I want to do is I'm going to go in and apply this proposal. The act of doing this is going to tell Crowbar that this proposal should be built. It's going to take the resources, it's going to figure out that those resources are discovered but not ready for actual install, and it's going to install the operating system. If we had the BIOS and RAID bar clamps, it would actually run the BIOS and RAID configuration, install the operating system, install the Chef client, then set up the run list and let Chef do the rest of the deployment. It's a lot of steps. Crowbar has a state machine that handles the sequencing of all those steps. So it's telling you here that it's successfully queued. If we jump back over to here, we'll see this node reboot in just a moment. What I want to do before we show you that is I'm going to show you the change in status lights and the change over here. So what you see going on right now is all of a sudden we're no longer waiting for Crowbar to make a decision. We've told it we want that machine to be provisioned, and Crowbar is going through and saying, hey, you're done with discovery, let's take it to let's do the next steps. And that's exactly what's going on here. At the same time, on the Crowbar user interface, you can see that the glance proposal is now in this queued state. So it's not actually building glance yet, it's building the servers to build glance on top of. It's an interesting distinction. So the system's actually going through and preparing the environment. This is pre-Chef. It's getting things ready for Chef to take over. Once everything's ready for Chef, then that flashing light's going to turn red, and that means that we've actually turned it over to Chef, and Chef is now building glance and doing the work to actually deploy the application. So in this case, the node is flashing red. That means its state is going through. It's moved from discovered, which is a pause, through an actual building state. So Crowbar has many different states that the system will walk through as it brings those nodes up. So what's going on here is that this machine's slowly coming up, but you can see its hardware is installed, and it's going to start doing discovery work for that. Let me jump over so we can see that. So now what you've actually got, it did a Pixie boot, and now it's going through and installing the operating system. What I want to do is I want to highlight a couple of things that you'll see in the system. One of them is this row of buttons. This row of buttons is used to control the Chef state of the nodes so that you can rebuild your system. It's a very, very fundamental principle of ours with Crowbar that you should be able to re-image, reset, rebuild your system every time you need to. So you can constantly change and update your system as you work to get it into the configuration you're trying to achieve. And the way that works is a reinstall will tell Chef that you want to reset the operating system, wipe out all the data, but leave Chef exactly as is. So if you're modifying cookbooks and recipes, that's the button for you, because it's going to wipe everything out and then reapply them. But you won't lose any of your Chef configuration. Your roles will still be there. Reset will take all the roles off of that node. So it says, I just want this machine base raw. It's as if you clicked allocate. It'll reset it back to a unallocated node, or an allocated node but with no roles applied to it. And then delete actually just removes it from the system, so it just wipes it out. If you have IPMI enabled, it will actually reboot, shut down. It'll do the appropriate things for you when you're using these nodes. The other thing that you'll see is in a node that actually has bar clamps and rolls. Remember, this node is just being allocated, so it doesn't have any yet. You're going to see the bar clamps that have been that node has been assigned to, and then the Chef roles that node is using. So this is a really useful thing for sort of seeing the system at a system view, and then for all these bar clamps are universal, but the way the system's configured is if you click one, it'll actually highlight which nodes are in that role. So that's really useful if you have a system that's split. Say you're using Nova and Swift, and some nodes are Nova and some are Swift. You actually can click on the roles and see which nodes that role has been applied to. Okay, and then let me take a second while we're waiting. Let's see how our bar clamp is doing. So the bar clamps viewer, these are our templates. A bar clamp is just a template. It's actually a data bag in Chef, and it represents sort of like an instance. It's not an instance. It's a superclass that you would inherit from. So what would happen is these templates, you can create multiple copies of them, multiple instances, and they each inherit the default values, but then you override them when you create it. So this shows you how many proposals have been created for the system. And if I clicked on one, I could then create a new proposal. The proposals view shows you all the proposals that are in the system. And the green light shows you that they are active and deployed. The blinking yellow says it's still waiting. You can see it's pending. Once this node is built, it'll switch to red. That it's deploying. And then the active roles is going to show us all of the deployed bar clamps. Right, all the deployed proposals. Notice Glance is not in this list yet. Once it's done, it'll be in this. Once it's green on the proposals list, it'll be here. And what you could actually do. Sorry, I clicked on the bar clamp. If I click on the proposal, if I don't want Nagios, I could delete this role, and it would pull Nagios out of the run list for all the nodes that are shown. Okay. And then you can see I actually have a little bit of cruft from a previous node that I deleted from the system. We're working to make delete cleaner. Nodes end up in a lot of places once they're in the system. And once I have a proposal that's been deleted, I would be able to come into one of these proposals, and then I could delete it. So it takes 2 steps to remove a proposal. If it's active, you have to delete it from being active or deactivate it, and then you have to delete the proposal in order to remove the proposal. This one's a good example to show while we're waiting, because it shows one with multiple roles, and then it also shows the raw view. So every bar clamp has these default views. We have a custom UI per bar clamp for most of these bar clamps that don't force you to edit JSON, but behind the scenes they're actually just JSON files, and you can go in and see all the details. So some of our bar clamps have more configuration settings than they expose in the GUI, and you can see them by clicking on the custom button. If they don't have a GUI, then you're not clicking custom won't give you any extra values. All right, let's see where we stand with our bar clamp. Our proposal. So this is still flashing yellow. I've gone for 17 minutes. I'm going to pause and skip over the boring part. I did skip over the whole going from yellow to red to green. It's now Glance is set up. Everything is good. And if we look at the dashboard, here is our node. It is green also. That is all. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos, please leave comments on my blog.